Hi friends, this video consists of 13th and 14th Feb editorials. Now starting with the first editorial, which is solar power breaks price barrier. This is related to environment topic and this is basically about the renewable energy. In a recent incident in Madhya Pradesh, the auction price of the solar photovoltaic power per kilowatt hour has been dropped to rupees 3 to rupees 2.97. So the auction price is just rupees 3 to rupees 2.97 for the photovoltaic power per kilowatt hour. Now, this is a very important move given that given our renewable energy targets, the importance is like see in 2010 we started our Jawaharlal Nehru solar mission with a target of you know 12 gigawatts of solar capacity by 2016 to 17, but in reality we could achieve only 10 gigawatts of the 10 gigawatts by 2016 to 2017. Now there has been new governments, the new targets by the government, especially the government is aiming for 100 gigawatts by 2022. So in order to fulfill or achieve this target, we have to more focus on the renewable energy, especially on the solar photovoltaic cells. So, given lack of electricity in various areas, I know renewable energy plays a very important role, but there is a lacuna in national policy on renewable energy because the policy has been failed to tap the investment of the middle class into the renewable energy. So, our government policies or the government initiatives has failed to tap the investment by the middle class into the renewable energies. So what is needed is basically our governments have given maximum attention to the grid connected large scale installations, and there's very slow progress. And very slow progress on the rooftop solar. So the rooftop solar installations are not much encouraged by our governments. So in order to reach a target of 100 gigawatts by 2022, what is needed is there should be a participation by both residential and also by the commercial sectors. So we need participation by both the residential and commercial sector. So the suggestion given by the writer is that the state utilities should be they should be given the mandatory time frame to introduce the net metering system with the feed-in tariff that is designed to encourage the average consumer to invest in the photovoltaic modules. So with the feed-in tariff, so we have to give some time frame for the state utilities to come out with the net metering system with the feed-in tariff, so that it will be an encouragement for the citizens to invest in the solar photovoltaic modules by taking grid electricity prices into account. So we can also take the example of Germany, which is very successful in regarding this renewable energy, especially the solar photovoltaic energy. And there should be various initiatives in order to attract the consumers by giving them various concessions, etc. And also we know that, as we have seen in Madhya Pradesh, with decrease in auction price, there are further chances that solar photovoltaic prices decreases, and therefore the larger installations and the smaller installations, they should be they require periodic reviews. So there should be a periodic review of the smaller installations and the larger installations, given that there's a chances of decrease in prices of solar photovoltaic cells. Now moving on to the next editorial, this is related to international issues. So this basically speaks about one China check for Donald Trump. So now Donald Trump is honoring the one China policy. First, before when the Donald Trump became president, there was he took few moves which was against one China policy. For example, he accepted the congratulatory call from the Taiwan president, and also in an interview he declined to endorse one China policy unless he saw progress from Beijing in its trade and currency policies. So he was using, he had decided to use his one China policy as a bargaining chip with the China. But now what is happening is that, so before moving into that, let's one China policy, as we have seen in previous editorials, one China policy is nothing but China sees Taiwan as the part of China itself. So China doesn't see Taiwan as in separate separate state or entity. It sees Taiwan as a part of China. This is basically one China policy. And so by accepting the congratulatory call from the Taiwan president, Donald Trump moved against this one China policy. So there was lot of resentment against this move in China. After such moves by Donald Trump, China said one China policy is a bedrock of its engagement with the world. So China, engages with the world through its one China policy. Therefore, it doesn't accept any country going against its one China policy. Now, later, what is happening is that Donald Trump now he is committed to honor the one China policy. So this is an important move in order to reduce the tensions between China and US, and there are various areas where both China and US can cooperate. For example, in related to global conflicts, and obviously they compete with each other in related to trade and investment, and definitely they disagree with each other related to South China Sea disputes. So these are the various areas between China and USA, which includes cooperation, competition, and disagreement, etc. Now moving on to the next editorial, this which is sex offender registries don't work. This topic comes under the social issues. So this basically speaking about recently our Minister for Women and Child Development suggested to bring out the National Sex Offender Registry. After an incident where the convicted sex offender, he allegedly confessed that he had raped hundreds of girls over 10 years in New Delhi. So after such confession, the Minister for Women and Child Development said that India should also bring out National Sex Offender Registry, which is already operational in various countries like US, UK, Australia, and Canada. Now, what is National Sex Offender Registry? This is a registry which includes the list of all the sex offenders, and the sex offenders should who are convicted of the sexual offense. They should periodically check in with the law enforcement agencies like police, and they should inform regarding the place they are residing, the place of employment. They should also provide details of the physical description, and sometimes there are also restrictions on the place of residence or the place of employment on the sex offenders. And and the other best thing is that public can have access to this records, so that the entire community is aware of the sex offenders. Now, looking at the impact on the crime due to this sex offender registry, there's as we saw seen in the other countries, there's not much significant difference in sex crimes. So that does not lead to a decrease in the sex crimes, because this basically the sex offender registry, it hardens the registered sex offenders, so making them more likely to commit additional sex offense, as a criminal behavior is more attractive for the registered sex offenders. So what we have seen, the trend is that the registered sex offenders, they are more prone to commit more crimes because they find the criminal behavior more attractive. Let's see the main reason for that. So the main reason is basically due to it is basically a social and psychological reason. First is that before seeing that, for public, the good thing is that sex offender registry provides a sense of security. But if you take the sex offenders, the impact on the sex offenders is very huge, because they have they'll have difficulty in finding the houses or employment, and they also have very limited options. So once you make it public that a person is a sex offender, therefore it makes it very difficult for him to find a house for rent or house place to stay, or it also makes it difficult for him to find a good employment or find a good employment opportunities. And also the sex offender will face threat, harassment, violence from the others. And therefore, given these disadvantages, they find, therefore the sex offenders, they find the criminal behavior more attractive, and they feel that that's the only option left for them, because of difficulty in finding the employment. So therefore they again move back being a sex offenders. And also the status as former sex offenders has the effect of stigmatizing them for the life, for lifetime, and which makes it difficult for the reformation and dignified life after the imprisonment impossible. So even after coming out of the prison, they find it difficult to have a dignified life. So this is the effect on the sex offenders due to this National Sex Offender Registry. Now, coming to the troubling aspect of the suggestion by the Minister for Women and Child Development is that, this minister also suggests to include juveniles and the under trial persons for the, for sexual offences into the registry. First is that if you include a person who is under trial into the registry, it ignores the basic consideration of civil rights of an accused person. So, our constitution of fundamental rights protects, no, grants certain rights in order to for the for an accused person. So it will be, if you include the under trial person into the registry, it will be going against those rights, or limiting those rights. Now, if you take juveniles, the suggestion to include juveniles indicates a lack of understanding of constitutional rights and also lack of understanding of obligation under the UN Convention for Rights of Child. See, under Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012, it criminalizes both consensual sexual intercourse with the minors and between the minors. So you can't, even there is consent between the two parties. It is criminal activity to have an sexual intercourse with the minors or sexual intercourse between two minors. So therefore, uh, given this provision, there are few chances that the juveniles could be included in this registry, and they could be named as sex offenders for the lifetime, even though they had this consensual sexual intercourse. So this is again a huge impact on the children or juveniles. So, taking into consideration all the drawbacks, the better option left with us, other than forming a national sex offender registry, is that first we have to look at an institutional failures in tackling these cases, because the rate of conviction for offences is still low, and also the rate of pendency for the rape cases is still high. There's high pendency of the rape cases, and also low rate of conviction. So we have to this both speaks about our institutional failures. Therefore, what we have to do is that in the background of weak investigation and institutional machinery, we have to strengthen this investigative and institutional machinery instead of registries, because as we have seen in the other countries, registries don't work effectively, but what is more effective is the strong investigative and institutional machinery. Now, moving on to the 14th Feb editorial, which is North Korea lobs a missile challenge. This basically speaks about the launch of medium range ballistic missile by the North Korea. The North Korea had already, is under a lot of sanctions. For example, UN Security Councils also imposed sanctions, and various countries including US has also imposed sanctions, and there are many countries are warning North Korea against this missiles, against a missile or the nuclear program. But the North Korea usually launches the ballistic missile to challenge the new U.S. president. For example, we have already seen, as in case of in 2010 during Barack Obama. So when Barack Obama became the president, the North Korea launched a missile then in order to challenge the new president. There, as I know, in the same way, the North Korea has again launched another ballistic missile in order to challenge a new U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, coming to the Donald Trump reaction, it is more restrained towards North Korea because North Korea is nuclear power, whereas he had imposed immediate sanctions on the Iran for its missile test. So, because since Iran is not a nuclear power and North Korea is a nuclear power, there is more restrained action from the U.S. president. Now, looking at now there were many countries which have sanctions warning against North Korea, but it is not proved very effective, or did not impact much, did not impact the North Korea much. So what is a better option is that? So better option will be to get China on board, because China has an leverage over North Korea due to its better relationship with the North Korea. Therefore, we can get China on board and engage, and with the under the mediumship of China, we can engage with the North Korea. So that will be a better option for the US. Now, moving on to the next tutorial, which is swimming out of a numerical soup. This basically speaks about the budget and its various initiatives. First is that first fact from the editorial is that the government has achieved a fiscal target of 3.5% of GDP. Now, other thing is that there has been a conservative forecast on increasing tax revenue collection. So there's not much. The government is not predicting huge tax revenue collection because first when there was decrease in the oil prices, the government could they could tax the oil, and therefore with this there was a lot of you know due to this there was increase in the tax revenue. Now since the oil prices are decreasing, the government cannot increase the tax revenue, therefore there will be a decrease in the tax revenue collection. And another initiative by the government is that due to which there will be a decrease in tax revenue collection is the decrease in the tax rate from 10 to 5% in the first slab of the income tax. So therefore we know that already in India tax to GDP ratio is very low, or which is almost 11% of the tax is almost 11% of the GDP. So given under this scenario, we are again decreasing the tax rate for the first slab from 10% to 5%. So the writer is just suggesting that the government should increase the tax to GDP ratio in order to increase the public expenditure in the social and infrastructure sector. Therefore, in order to increase the tax to GDP ratio, we could do this with the two-pronged strategy. So the two-pronged strategy in order to increase the tax to GDP ratio is that first there should be no further decrease in the tax rate. And also the larger share of the national income must be brought under the income tax. So there are there are few in national income which is not under the income tax, so we have to bring this larger share of the national income under the income tax. And also we have to increase computerization and KYC requirements, strict KYC requirements, and also the penalties in cash transaction to make the tax innovation more difficult. So what is needed is that first we have no further decrease in the tax rate and bring the larger share of the national income under the income tax, and also within strict measures like increased computerization, KYC requirements, and increased penalties on large cash transactions, making it impossible for the tax invasion. We can increase the tax to GDP ratio. So other change in the government budget is that there has been decrease in the tax from 30% to 25% for the companies with the turnover less than 50 crores. So this is to compensate the small companies affected by the demonetization. The writer says it's a regressive step because it will encourage the bigger companies to split into the smaller ones to enjoy the lower tax rate. Another measure is that ceiling of rupees 2000 on cash donation to political parties plus electoral bonds for political funding. So this is a good measure, and the writer suggests that it should be supplemented by by subjecting the accounts of all major parties to auditing maybe by CAG. So the writer says that all the accounts of the major parties should be audited maybe by CAG. Now moving on to next editorial, which is finance and facade. This basically speaks about the financial institutions and its control over the politics of a country. So first let's see what is liberalism. Liberalism means the separation between the state and the market, and the market or the capitalists, they decried the government interference in the market. So they were completely opposing the government interference in the market. Now, looking at a recent trend which is neoliberalism believes that government should intervene in the market, but only on the side of banks, finance capitalist, and lending agency. So every time when there's a financial speculation which creates crisis, the governments are expected to tax its citizens and use the money to save the banks, financial capitalists, or lending agencies. So the basically neoliberalism says the government should intervene in the market, but only on the side of the banks, finance capitalists, etc., and it should tax the citizens in order to during financial crisis, in order to in order to use the money to save this banks, financial capitalists, etc. Now, as a result, what we are seeing is that this financial capital is affecting both social capital and industrial capital. So the financial capital is growing more stronger and affecting both the social and industrial capital. Now, for example, if you take the recent moves by the US President Donald Trump, he is like more emphasizing on bringing jobs home. But what is that? There is will be a greater curbs on the industrial capital. If you give more importance to such measures like bringing jobs home or giving importance to the US citizens and jobs, it will be a greater curbs on the industrial capital, right? So, therefore, converting the industrial capital into financial speculation. So when the industries don't work, definitely it will be in loss. So it will encounter losses, therefore leading to financial speculation. Now, this financial speculation leads into the crisis, and who is left free here is financial capital. So there's not much curb on the financial capital. So whatever curb is there, it will basically on the industrial capital and on the social capital, like by decreasing the expenditure, public expenditure on the health, education, etc., and also decreasing on with greater curbs on the industrial capital. What is left free is the financial capital. So the financial capital is growing in power, and whenever there's financial crisis, it's expecting the government to work in favor of the financial capital. As pointed by the Mauricio Lazantro in the Governing by the Debt, he says that economic is not an independent field, which it is a new politics of neoliberalism. That is why the government are expected or employed to tax citizens in order to repay finances and banks. So what is happening is the governments are taxing the citizens in order to finance the or repay to the financiers on the banks. So as a result, what is happening is that now the financial capital is governing the politicians. So now the politicians are not the supreme power, the finance capital are the supreme power, which is affecting, it is affecting the industrial capital, the social capital, and the main thing, it is affecting the politics of a country. So that's it for this video. I hope you found this video useful. If so, I would request you to like and subscribe to my channel, and also